A bit waster video, no long introduction, and I use an editor. So I should be publishing a final project reveal on my custom Vaquero motorcycle project, but instead I'm publishing a why not to use Threadlocker on fasteners near ABS plastic. So to demonstrate this, I'm going to use some scrap fairing plastic from the wrecked fairing that came off the project bike. I'm going to drill 3 holes into the plastic as clean as I can, and then I'm going to put 3 fasteners in those holes using Threadlocker in 3 different applications. On the first one, I'm going to apply the Threadlocker just to the threads of the bolt. The recommended way to use Threadlocker is to apply it to the threads of the bolt and then thread the nut on. On the second fastener, I'm going to do something similar to what I did on the project bike, which was I backed the threads out of the fastener and dropped a drop of the Threadlocker into the fastener hole, or what would normally be the nut hole. It was actually a plate that holds the hinges together. I dropped a drop of the Threadlocker into the hole and then threaded the bolt back in. That was the wrong thing to do. And then the third way to do it, which is not any way to do it at all, is to apply the Threadlocker to the nut before you put it on the bolt. So I use Threadlocker on the hinges of the saddlebags on the project bike. I had read on the forums that the bolts that hold the hinges on the saddlebags were known to vibrate loose and become lost, and somebody actually recommended using Threadlocker. And when I had disassembled those hinges, I saw what looked like Threadlocker on those bolts. So when I reassembled them, I cleaned the old Threadlocker off and was going to use new Threadlocker on those bolts. I used Permatex. It's basically the same formula as Loctite. I did go to the website to look at the user guides and the technical specs to see which Threadlocker might be the most appropriate. It's not that I suspected it at the time. I've actually gone back and looked at this since to make sure I didn't miss something. When I was actually looking, I was just trying to decide which Threadlocker to use, whether there was something. I knew that red was a permanent Threadlocker, and I knew that blue was a medium. I just went there to look to see if there was anything else that might be more appropriate. Green Threadlocker was intended for plastic fasteners, and since I wasn't using plastic fasteners, I ignored the green. It may have been that the green would be better to use near plastic, but again, there was no warning to not use the medium near plastic. So after applying the Threadlocker to the bolts, I snugged them. Since I found the damage on the saddlebag, I found other people had used Threadlocker near plastic parts, RC modelers, a guy who put his pistol grips on with Threadlocker, another person who had assembled a crossbow with Threadlocker. All of them had found the same problem I did, that it destroys your ABS plastic. The other problem that was mentioned was that even just the presence of the Threadlocker near the plastic, the actual curing process, creates an off gas that might deteriorate plastic. I wrapped this assembly with some saran wrap. Since the hinges that deteriorated in my project bike were inside the saddlebag. So I just want to replicate the same conditions that caused my damage. So after 46 hours, I allowed this to cure. And as you can see on that middle fastener and the fastener on the right, you can already see cracks. Those cracks were not there before. Something has stressed the ABS plastic already and cracked it and deteriorated the plastic around those right 2 fasteners that had, again, the middle fastener had excessive Threadlocker on it. The rightmost had the appropriate amount of thread locker on just the threads, but still enough that would probably get down into the plastic. Obviously, in both cases, the thread locker came in contact with the plastic. On the leftmost fastener, there was very little thread locker applied. It was only applied to the nut. It was probably squeegeed off by the time the nut got down to the bottom of the threads. I doubt very much thread locker came in contact with the plastic. And as you'll see when I disassemble this, the two fasteners that had an appropriate amount of thread locker on it was doing its job. They required the appropriate amount of pressure to disassemble. As a matter of fact, it bonded the washers to the plastic. And the fastener that had very little thread locker on it actually came apart quite easily. I don't think it was actually, the thread locker was actually going to be effective on that fastener anyway. But as you can see, the thread locker makes the plastic brittle. It actually makes it, in some cases, and certainly on my saddlebags, the plastic nearest the fasteners was actually disintegrated. Of course, it had cured for longer than this before I discovered the problem. But you can see that the unaffected plastic is quite resilient, like you would expect the ABS plastic on a fairing to be. But right near the fasteners, it has become very brittle and easily chips off and breaks off. And that's what happens when you use thread locker on fasteners, on metal fasteners that are in contact with or maybe just even near ABS plastic. Obviously, it's not a good idea. Now, I know there are people out there that will tell me that they already knew this. Congratulations. You win the prize. There are people that will tell me that I've used an excessive amount of thread locker, but I would not recommend using any amount of thread locker on fasteners that are going to be used in conjunction with or maybe even near ABS plastic. Again, there's no warnings on the packaging. There's no warnings at either the Permatex or Loctite websites in their technical documents that I could find. The only way I could find any evidence that anybody else knew about this was when I searched Loctite attacks plastic. I found several other forums, radio-controlled cars, radio-controlled modeling cars and planes. I found a gentleman who ruined pistol grips by attaching the pistol grips with metal hardware that used Loctite. I found a gentleman who had ruined a crossbow when he assembled it with Loctite. I found an occasion where a Harley dealer had discovered that his customer had attached his trunk with Loctite on the hardware and ruined the trunk. So it is something that happens, and if you've experienced it, you'll never do it again. But if you didn't know, and I've seen on the Vaquero forums, people have recommended using the thread locker on the hinges exactly as I did. I've also seen people recommending using thread locker as they install their speakers and stereo amps in their custom installations because obviously those vibrate, and I don't know if anybody's experienced this problem. Maybe you've been lucky and didn't get enough thread locker on there to cause a problem, but clearly thread locker and ABS plastic don't mix. So hopefully somebody else will see this, remember it, learn from my mistake. I'm paying dearly for it. I've had to order new saddlebag side covers, and I'm having them repainted. I've had the whole motorcycle custom painted, and so now I have to have those side covers repainted in the custom color that I've picked, and it is not a inexpensive mistake.